welcome back to Consumer Guard, the show on the lookout for you. Although the food price inflation has dropped, it's not all food items that will come down.
With the food inflation currently sitting under 8% from the highs we experienced in October last year, we contact economist Francois Stoffberg to find out what this means for the consumer.
Generally, lower food prices help on the every household's bottom line, specifically poorer households who spend a larger portion of their entire income on food prices. They stand to benefit a lot if we see food prices decrease. So in general terms, it means it's a good thing for the household if food prices decrease, because I have more income now available to buy other products, and I don't have to substitute away from the products that I usually prefer that might have become very expensive over the last couple of months.
The major reason for the decrease is the fact that the country is no longer in the season of drought.
Major reason for this decrease is, of course, that we've moved past this two-season drought that we had over the last 2 years, and we've heard rumors that the harvest this year would be very good, and it seems to be true from some of the harvest reports that we've seen from the summer crops all the way to the last couple of months have been doing very well. So that decrease in the price of the product that you use to create the end product, which is your pop that you have in the mornings, or the finished meat that you get from the abattoir, that has decreased now as well. So because we have had a good harvest of grains, of other summer crops, we've seen this gradual decrease in the end price of foods that we buy from the shop.
According to Stats SA and the BFAP calculations, the biggest decreases in food prices are in your fresh produce, meaning that not all food items will all of a sudden become cheaper.
Yes, so there's an interesting index, a nutritionally sound index that was made by a company in Pietermaritzburg, where they look at certain items that an individual would have to take in, or what the general population as well takes in, that is nutritionally sound, so that you would get all your nutrients, because we know you can't just eat starch, you have to sometimes or later eat some protein as well. So interesting there is that what they've seen, like products that are commonly consumed by many South Africans, chicken feet, chicken neck products, extra, have become actually quite expensive over the last year.
Items like bread, rice, maize, and your protein products have continued to increase when you compare on a year-on-year basis during the same period of last year. When it comes to the price of meat, because of the drought, most farmers culled their livestock, which meant we had cheaper meat prices in 2016 as stock was available. However, prices are expected to increase this year as farmers will be looking to rebuild their stocks.
Yes, well, actually interesting is that bread prices have come down from last year's average, which was about 11% to 6% now, which is good news, because that's something that everybody consumes, or most people at least. Well, everybody consumes bread. Meat prices have increased from last year's average about 4.7 to where it's at 8% now. Now, the reason being is, of course, with the drought, a lot of the farmers had to cull their herds, reduce the size of their herds, which flooded the market. So last year we saw prices even as low as 3.5% increase in the meat industry, because we had this oversupply. But now, once again, we're restocking those herds, rebuilding those herds. Now we'll see this gradual increase in meat prices, and that's a cyclical thing. We usually see it. And then, of course, the other interesting is milk, eggs, etc. Prices there have also decreased from about 7.7% down to 5.6% where they are currently.
One fact that works in the favor of consumers is that the petrol price has begun to drop.
Usually it takes a while longer for these price effects actually to be felt. I think the other factor that will also help us now in the medium term, moving towards the medium term, that's the 18-month forecast, is the fact that petrol prices are also starting to decrease. So both of these factors in the basket. Food's contribution to inflation as well as transport has decreased substantially, and the momentum now seems to have shifted to a lower rate of food prices and transport costs.
The prices might have dropped, but what does this mean for the low-income earning households? We spoke to Patrick Gele from Stats SA to find out more.
Stats SA keeps track on data to help South Africa make informed decisions. With the country moving into a recession, we asked Mr. Patrick Kelly what this means for South Africans.
Well, what it means is that the prices of food are increasing less rapidly than they were, say, a year ago. So a year ago, we were in the midst of a drought. This was really pushing food prices very high. We were seeing double-digit inflation in food. The fact that we've had good rains this summer, it means that maize, wheat prices have come down. These not only feed people, but they also feed animals. And we are generally seeing a moderation of food inflation. We can't speak about all food with one brush. So typically what we've seen is actually a decrease in prices in certain commodities, such as mini meal, oils, bread, pasta, rice and the like. But what we're seeing is still quite high increases in meat.
With the unemployment rate high, many of the families out there are living beyond the poverty line.
Well, if we look at the entire range of goods and services that South Africans spend their money on, the number one item is actually housing. Housing, together with electricity, water and associated costs, consumes about 20 to 25% of the average South African family's expenditure. Next to that is food. And food expenditure has in fact increased over the last number of years. This is partly because of the drought and the increase in prices that we had. It's very difficult to reduce the actual amount that you eat. So you typically then are paying more for the same amount of food. Having said that, we've seen in the latest GDP figures actually a contraction in the amount of food items that people are buying. So the economic situation over and above the high food prices is clearly impacting on consumers now.
If you compare South Africa 10 years ago and now, our food prices have escalated to an all-time high.
Well, there's typically two drivers of food prices. The first one are demand-driven. Typically when people are feeling a bit richer, they may spend more money on more luxurious food items. So typically if a family's been eating chicken, they're feeling a bit richer, they might buy more beef. The other way of looking at it is cost related, and this has really been the driver of food prices over the last couple of years. So we know that we've had a big drought, and this has reduced the supply of certain food items, thereby driving prices up.
Majority of the households can barely afford a basic food basket.
Food prices are typically driven by the input costs of generating, producing that food. And so if we have adverse weather conditions, prices typically go up. Certain items we pretty much import. So if we talk about wheat-based products, bread, if we talk about pasta, we import a lot of those items. And so the exchange rate then can have an impact. Typically over the last number of years, the changes in the exchange rate have had a moderate impact on food prices. I think that going forward we can see that food prices should continue to moderate because of good weather conditions in most parts of the country. We know that's not for all parts of the country.
Something needs to change, especially for consumers to be able to afford basic food items.
In the past, the Competition Commission has uncovered scandals about price collusion amongst food manufacturers. We sat down with them to find out if this could still be the case and if there is any truth to the story of retailers selling shelf space to food manufacturers.
The Competition Commission has been holding inquiries into the grocery retail sector with buyer groups and retailers making presentations. Since the start, there have been some interesting findings, says the chairman of the inquiries, Mr. Lulama Mtanga.
What is becoming the biggest outcry more and more with each day of these public hearings is the manner in which the supermarket chains operate. The message that is coming out is that if something is not being done, is not done to curtail what is going on or to put a stop to the manner in which these businesses are operating, the South African retail or grocery retail landscape will end up in few hands. Few hands being Pick n Pay, Shoprite, Spar and Checkers.
At this point in time, the Commission can't say what will be done to major retailers that have been bullying their competition into business.
We keep saying that, or I keep saying that we are in the early stages of, we're still gathering information. We're not in the early stages, but with the public hearings, we're getting more and more people coming forward. So in that regard, I would like to say, even though we've had a number of players in the market, the message that is coming through now is becoming stronger and stronger, and on one side.
We asked her if there's any truth to the rumour that retailers might be selling shelf space to manufacturers to place their stocks at eye-level shelves for consumers to see them clearly.
It could be an aspect of what we're doing, and it also depends on, we will look at it to the extent that it has an impact on, it becomes relevant on the objectives that we are looking at. As an issue on its own, unless there's a stronger voice, we have not had that coming through and through or strongly in this submission.
In the past, the Commission has investigated and found certain manufacturers guilty of price fixing, but there hasn't been accusations levelled against the 4 major retail chain stores of doing such.
Well, price fixing has not been raised at all as an issue, not in these public hearings. We have not a single participant has raised anti-competitive conduct that relates to price fixing. Sorry, no.
It's time to conclude this topic. Here's our thoughts on the food prices in Mzansi and our consumer tip of the week.
Even though the food inflation has dropped, food in South Africa remains unaffordable for the majority of the population. We at the Consumer Guard would like to recommend a commission of inquiry to determine what the true factors driving the costs of food prices are, and should there be any company to be found guilty of colluding and price fixing, they should pay the heaviest penalties possible. And people cannot be getting rich at the expense of the poor. Now, let's take a look at your consumer tip of the week.
One of the things we see in the CPI is that there's an extremely wide range of products on offer, and there's an extremely wide range of prices. Typically, supermarkets in particular will tell you the price per kilogram, the price per milliliter, and I would advise shoppers to look very carefully to see which actually is the cheapest item that they can buy. Look for special promotions. We see many sales across the country, promotions, and take the opportunity for those. My personal advice is as well, spend your money on things that your family really needs and not on gambling or other related items.
We've reached the end of our show. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, Salang Sindri.